I'm Benedict Wallbank from BIMit Consultancy, and he is going to give us another perspective from the UK. Thank you.
Okay, so the last time I was here, I was showing some BIM work that we did. That was about five years ago, and I was speaking to Alan, and he said, well, you know, what are you doing now? And I'm offering consultancy to firms to help them implement BIM. And so he said, great, you can come and talk about that then. And I said, well, how long have I got? And he said 20 minutes. So I gulped and said, God, that's impossible. But actually, it's a really good discipline to have somebody say to you, distill what you really think are the important things about how you implement BIM into 20 minutes. So I had a think, and hang on, this is corrupted. It has, and it didn't yesterday. That's disastrous. It's not working. It's not. Okay, I'm going to talk anyway. So my problem is that there's. Actually, I'm going to try. Can I try and get this to work? That's typical. We tried this yesterday, incidentally, and it worked perfectly. So great IT as usual. No problem. How many people in the room are the leaders of their practice in such that you can change the direction of the type of business that you're doing? How many people of you are technologically based, i.e. the CAD drivers of your business? Right, the bulk of you. And that's going to feed into part of what I'm going to say. There are a few leaders of your business. Okay,
that should work.
Okay. Let's see if it works now. Yes, thank you. Hallelujah, what a relief. So, I think the main problem that we've got is that there is this perception that BIM is technology. We've just heard, we've had some brilliant speeches today. The first one, Professor Horan's one, was wonderful because it gave this idea that time is changing and you really have to think about what this means for your business. We've just heard that it's a strategic imperative. Now, we all have our favourite softwares. I've got mine. We've heard some Revit users today, some ArchiCAD users, Bentley architecture, if you're architects, if you're engineers, Tekla, CITA, there are loads of different softwares. Because BIM is now ND, it's as many different things as you can think of, with everybody using their specialist softwares. And those softwares are beginning to talk to each other. If I have a Tekla model, I can transfer it into ArchiCAD. If I have an ArchiCAD model, I can take it out into Revit MEP. It's no longer, I mean, there are, these are technological things that we've got to work out, but it's no longer about technology. It's about management and organization, essentially, process and workflow. It's how you organize your practice, and that's what I'm interested in, these areas. So, why has this happened? Why is there this perception that it's technology? And I think it comes from this original part of the move from the drawing board. The move from the drawing board to CAD was not transformational. It was business as usual. So there were a few implications about how you had to organize your practice and what you had to do, but actually not that many. So now we have this awful thing that when it comes to BIM, the director in the practice will say, oh, I've heard of BIM, yes, and everybody's saying it's coming and we ought to go. And he'll go to the CAD manager and say, go and find out something about that for me and we'll maybe integrate it onto a project. No, it's much more fundamental than that. So, on that second stage where you're doing lonely BIM, even there you've got effectiveness. You can do, even on lonely BIM, you can do environmental analysis if you're an architect, if you're building at an early stage. You can do visualizations that you could never do before. So there are positives there. But even to do that, even within your own practice, there are huge organizational implications about the way that you work, because you have to work far more collaboratively even within your practice to produce a usable model. But it's on this last stage where we're talking about collaborative BIM that the real change comes. And this is where the money is. This is, you know, there are effectivenesses that will make you money even if you're doing lonely BIM. But it's in the last stages, you know, this collaborative BIM stage where the real money, and it's serious money. You know, Paul Morrell, why is he driving BIM? He had this great quote, "This is not about BIM, but it is all about BIM." What are his drivers? You know, nobody in Europe has any money. We've all borrowed it from everybody else. None of us have any money. So Paul Morrell is targeting a 40% cut in public procurement costs. And the other driver is carbon. So he's got these two great drivers. How can he achieve that? He thinks he can achieve it through BIM. But interestingly, and this is where we talk about transformation and thinking about what's going to happen to the construction industry, he believes that this change is driven by the contractor. This is my opinion. I think he's sidelining the consultants completely. So he's going, in March, I think it is, there's a paper coming out, he's talking to the contractors about how you implement BIM, and the contractors are interested. So, within your practice, it's not just that guy. You have to take, you know, and whether that practice is a construction company, a quantity surveying company, project managers, it's the same for all of you. It has to be a root and branch approach that you take. And it has to be led by the director. So each of these people, you know, have a role. Interestingly, the only new person is this guy. The Americans call him the information manager. We tend to call him the model manager. The collaborative BIM manager is the guy who brings all those disparate parts together and polices it. So here, you know, here's a first thought. Who is that? Who takes that role? So if you're a QS, certainly in the UK where most jobs are now D&B, it's the QS who stays with the client throughout the process. So is he the best person to manage that? Is the contractor the best person to manage that? Well, he probably thinks, and probably this is the way it's going to go immediately, he thinks that I can control all that information to my best advantage. Is it the architect who's traditionally had the role of coordinating the work of the other parties? It can be any of those, but you know, you need to start thinking about those implications for your business. So each one of these people has their own role, and they're distinct and different. So if you're a director, you know, you should be thinking about BIM appointments. Now, I've just lectured for an hour. I've done a series of lectures last week to the directors of large architectural practices, and I spent an hour talking about BIM and appointments, an hour talking about BIM and contracts, an hour talking about BIM and PI and intellectual property rights issues. These are all things that you need to be aware of. They're all pretty straightforward, but BIM has an effect on all of those things. So as a director, you need to think about what's your overall BIM direction. Hardware and software purchase authorization, obviously, reviewing and authorizing project protocols. So you don't want to be writing those, but you need to understand what that means and how you work when you go and talk to your clients and to the other participants in the building information model, how that will work. And obviously ensure that you get fees for any additional bits of work that you do. And most of all, what business do we want to be in? Now, if you're an architect, you might say, I want to grab a bit more work. We're modelling anyway. The contractors don't really have that skill yet. Can I market myself with the contractors and do some construction modelling for them? Can I take on the role of the information manager? Or, alternatively, you could say, right, I want to concentrate, the contractors are best placed to do that. That sort of construction information work. Perhaps I ought to concentrate on those early stages of the work, up to planning application stage, and maybe make some connections with quantity surveyors. If I'm a quantity surveyor, a cost consultant, you know, the Davis Langdons of this world, what they're interested in is taking architects' intent models before there's any detail there and finding ways of, you know, using programs like, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there are lots of them, to analyse those early stage models and get a cost estimate at early stage. So make those connections, work out how that's going to work. If I'm a contractor, and this is the scary one, If I'm a contractor, what I want to be is Tesco's. Now you think about the retail industry and what IT did to the retail industry. It changed it beyond recognition. So before we had lots of small shops, we had different procurement routes and so on. Through the barcode and the club card, Tesco's completely revolutionized the retail industry. So it's unrecognizable now. And the Laing O'Rourke's and Scansikers of this world, and Paul Morell in the UK is backing them, recognize that they can control the supply chain from start to finish. So if you can say, well, okay, Mr. Architect, you build me a model, but you build it in this way, and you build it from these pieces, from elements which have an agreed supply from your supply chain. You've controlled the price of that. All the costs are already attached to that. Now, a director of Laing O'Rourke and David Throssell from Skanska came and talked at a roundtable discussion that I hosted last week. And what they were saying was really clear. 4 minutes? What they were saying was really clear. If the architects don't provide us with what we need, we'll take on that role ourselves. So that, you know, these are business transformational things that are just starting to happen now. So I'm going to move on. The one thing I would say, and it's, you know, all of these things that I've mentioned in passing, while there are detailed things that you need to know, you know, if there's one rule, it's document your intent and get it acknowledged by all parties. You know, is what I understand by a BIM the same as what my client understands by a BIM? You know, I might think he needs some visualizations. He might be thinking, I need, you know, a fully coordinated model that then goes on to become my facilities management in future years. So you've just got to make sure everybody knows what they're doing. I'm not even going to talk about those or that or that. So, you know, set up a group within your organization to deal with your standards, to deal with, you know, make it something that all parts of your organization feel involved in and understand what your objectives are and make those objectives clear. Protocols are the key to all of this process, to what happens for your PI insurers, for what happens within contracts. You have to protocol set down what it is that you want to achieve. If you can, base those on your national standards. But you need flexibility. The protocols will change for each project that you do slightly. Part of the protocoling is map. You know, that wonderful thing, if it's a single model, it so isn't. You know, it's a shared bunch of information, but actually mapping out to the members of the team how you've achieved that. You know, these are actual ones from different projects that I did. So, in summary, so think strategically at the highest level within your company. Identify your BIM aims and objectives and how this works with your business plan. Most of all, collaborate with each other. So go to your local contractor and say, right, you know, we know, you know, we've got to cut costs or we're not going to be building anything. So how can I feed in to make this process more effectively? How can we get more stuff off site? You know, go and ensure that the prefabricated elements of a system-built school are beautiful. You know, make those connections. So collaborate, go and talk to people, understand how you can begin to make this stuff really work for you. Take a root and branch approach, and obviously, and I would say this, wouldn't I, ensure that training at all levels is integral. Yeah, you've got to train your staff, both the CAD operators and the directors of the practice. That's it, guys.